In the silent corners of the digital world, where shadows stretch longer than code, a symbol pulses like a dead star. 9 intersecting lines, a sigil of pure chaos. It appears scrawled on the walls of abandoned buildings, a cryptic scar on decaying concrete. It's found tattooed on the skin of lone wolf attackers, a permanent declaration of allegiance to an unseen war. It is embedded in the manifestos of those who seek to burn the world down, the final, chilling signature on a testament of hate. This is not just an esoteric emblem, it is an ideological virus, engineered to infect the disillusioned and the disenfranchised. It is the mark of the Order of the Nine Angles, or O9A, an organization that is less occult and more a complete spiritual system designed to engineer the collapse of civilization. Its doctrines are a deliberate inversion of all humanistic values, teaching that murder can be a sacrament, a necessary act of culling the weak. This is not just an esoteric emblem, it is an ideological virus, engineered to infect the disillusioned and the disenfranchised. It is the mark of the Order of the Nine Angles, or O9A, an organization that is less occult and more a complete spiritual system designed to engineer the collapse of civilization. Its doctrines are a deliberate inversion of all humanistic values, teaching that murder can be a sacrament, a necessary act of culling the weak. It preaches that terror is a legitimate path to self-evolution, a trial by fire to forge a new, predatory human being. It insists that compassion is a weakness to be purged, a vestige of a slave morality holding humanity back from its true, savage potential. How did such a nihilistic philosophy take root in the modern world? How did an obscure British occult group born from the esoteric fantasies and unrepentant ideologies of post-war Nazism become a decentralized global inspiration for real-world violence? This is the story of how belief becomes a weapon, how ancient mysticism is twisted into a blueprint for modern terror, and how the universal search for meaning can lead into the deepest darkness imaginable. The Order of the Nine Angles operates not in grand temples, but in the encrypted channels of the internet and the isolated minds of its followers. It offers a seductive promise that through transgression, through embracing the forbidden, one can achieve a form of godhood. It provides a complex, labyrinthine system of rituals, texts, and insight roles, assignments that require adherents to infiltrate and disrupt society from within, whether by joining extremist political groups or law enforcement agencies. This is not disorganized chaos, it is a strategy. A long-term war waged not with armies, but with ideas. A patient, generational effort to corrode the foundations of the world. To understand the O9A is to confront an uncomfortable truth, that some of the most dangerous threats we face do not announce themselves with banners and marches, but whisper from the abyss, cloaked in layers of occult symbolism, philosophical jargon, and deliberate misdirection. This investigation will peel back those layers, exposing the terrifying machinery that turns spiritual seeking into violent extremism. We will trace the bloodline of this idea from its shadowy founder to its modern-day disciples and ask the most critical question of all. In an age of alienation and digital anonymity, how many more are listening to the whispers from the dark? To find the source of these whispers, we must travel back in time, not to ancient, torchlit chambers, but to a more recent and familiar darkness, the fractured landscape of post-World War II Britain. The war had ended, its victory parades a thin veil over a nation shrouded in grief and exhaustion. Cities bore the physical scars of the Blitz, but deeper, invisible wounds festered in the collective psyche. A generation was grappling with the collapse of old certainties, the horrifying revelations of the Holocaust, and a profound spiritual void left by the industrial-scale slaughter. In this atmosphere of profound disillusionment, the mainstream sought stability and reconstruction, a return to a normalcy that no longer existed. But the fringes festered with unspoken desires and forbidden ideologies. In the shadows of a rebuilding society, two powerful undercurrents, seemingly disparate, began to converge. One was the esoteric tradition, a stream of occultism that had flowed through British culture for centuries, recently energized by controversial figures like Aleister Crowley. It was a world of secret societies, ritual magic, and the pursuit of individual apotheosis through transgression. For those who felt suffocated by the rigid conformity of post-war life, the occult offered a seductive alternative, a path to personal power, a secret knowledge that promised to unlock the hidden mechanisms of the universe. It was a rebellion against the perceived sterility of the modern world, a search for meaning not in God or country, but within the darkest, most unexplored corners of the self. This was not a passive belief system. It was an active, often dangerous pursuit of transformation. Here begins the first layer of this dark history. The other current was the toxic remnant of fascism. Defeated on the battlefield and publicly condemned at Nuremberg, National Socialism did not simply vanish. It mutated. Stripped of its state power, it retreated from the political arena into the realm of myth, becoming a kind of dark faith for a scattered, unrepentant few. This was the birth of esoteric Hitlerism, a grim synthesis that reimagined the Third Reich not as a failed political project, but as a spiritual cataclysm, a holy war against the forces of modernity. Its adherents performed a grotesque alchemy, transmuting historical failure into mystical prophecy. The war, they argued, was not lost. It was merely one battle in a cosmic struggle that transcended human lifetimes. Figures like the French-born writer Savitri Devi became high priestesses of this new creed, blending Nazi ideology with Hindu cyclical cosmology. She argued that Adolf Hitler was an avatar, a divine being sent to usher in the Kali Yuga, a dark age that would purify the world through destruction. In clandestine circles and through subversive publications, this ideology was nurtured. It offered a narrative of cosmic significance to those who felt alienated and powerless in the post-war order. It transformed political extremism into a mystical quest, and its fallen leader into a martyred god. The swastika was no longer just a political emblem. It became a holy sigil, a symbol of an eternal truth waiting to be resurrected. The swastika was no longer just a political emblem. It became a holy sigil, a symbol of an eternal truth waiting to be resurrected. The O9A would not emerge fully formed from this environment, but it was conceived here in the unholy union of occult ritual and unrepentant Nazism. It was a philosophy waiting for a prophet, a system of terror waiting for its architect. This was the fertile, poisoned soil from which a new and more insidious form of extremism would grow, one that understood that the most enduring empires are not built on land, but in the minds of men. That architect would emerge from the shadows of British extremism in the 1970s, a figure as enigmatic as he was volatile, David Myatt. He was a man of violent contradictions, a specter haunting the fringes of society. One day, he was a brutish enforcer for neo-Nazi street gangs like Combat 18, a physical presence defined by violence and radical politics. The next, he was a reclusive scholar, translating classical Greek texts and writing poetry in quiet solitude. This duality was not a sign of a fractured mind, but of a singular, terrifying purpose. Myatt saw the scattered embers of esoteric Hitlerism and recognized their potential not as a political movement, but as a spiritual weapon. He was not merely a follower. He was a synthesizer, a dark alchemist who would take these volatile ingredients, Nietzschean philosophy, pagan ritual, and unrepentant Nazism, and forge them into a coherent and terrifying system. Under the pseudonym Anton Long, a name that would become whispered with a mixture of reverence and fear in occult circles, he codified this philosophy. He gave it a name that echoed with cosmic menace, the Order of the Nine Angles. The O9A was his masterwork, a structured pathway meticulously designed to strip away every vestige of conventional morality, every shred of human empathy. He authored its foundational texts, the Black Book of Satan, the Diophel Quartet, outlining a brutal spiritual curriculum known as the Sevenfold Way. This was not a path of quiet meditation or intellectual study. It was a grueling, multi-decade ordeal of self-overcoming through radical transgression. It was a curriculum for creating monsters. Initiates were required to undertake insight roles, a core practice of the O9A's psychological warfare against the self. They were instructed to live for extended periods as their ideological opposites, to infiltrate the very structures they sought to destroy: police forces, military units, Christian monasteries, or rival political groups. The goal was to shatter the ego, to prove that identity, morality, and loyalty were mere constructs that could be worn and discarded like a mask. It was a training in absolute deception, designed to create the perfect subversive agent. But the most chilling doctrine, the one that separated the O9A from other dark occult groups, was the necessity of culling. The order openly and unambiguously advocated for human sacrifice, not as a symbolic act performed in ritual, but as a literal, physical rite of passage. It was framed as a necessary, Darwinian act of weeding out the mundane, a practical step toward creating a new, harder breed of human. Through these texts, Mayat provided a blueprint for self-dehumanization, a step-by-step guide to becoming a predator in human form. Only by embracing the darkest aspects of existence, he argued, could one truly evolve and serve the sinister aeonic goals of the order. This is where the true origin of the O9A lies, not just in an ideology, but in a methodology. It was a practical, repeatable process for turning alienated individuals into weapons for a cosmic war they believed was already underway. But a blueprint for evil is merely ink on a page until a hand is willing to build from it. The true horror of the Order of the Nine Angles would only be unleashed when its disciples, scattered across the globe, began to interpret its violent scripture not as metaphor, but as a direct command. The transition from abstract evil to tangible violence began not in a candlelit chamber, but in the cold, blue glow of a computer screen. The dawn of the internet was the catalyst the O9A had been waiting for, a digital nervous system through which its poison could flow unimpeded. Its decentralized, leaderless structure was perfectly suited for the anonymity of the burgeoning web. The writings of Anton Long, once passed hand to hand in obscure zines, were now digitized, uploaded, and seeded across 1,000 dark corners of the internet. Forums dedicated to the occult, encrypted chat rooms, and anonymous image boards became the new nexuses, the digital temples where the ideology could mutate and spread. Here, alienated youths from across the globe, hungry for a purpose that transcended the suffocating mundanity of modern life, found a complete system of meaning. It was a worldview that didn't just explain their rage and isolation, it sanctified them, framing them as signs of a superior nature. The breaking point came when these digital whispers turned into real-world screams. The doctrine of culling was no longer a philosophical exercise discussed in the abstract. It became the justification for a string of brutal, seemingly random acts of violence. Individuals and small, isolated cells, radicalized entirely online without ever meeting a physical mentor, began to act on the order's directives. These weren't grand, coordinated attacks. They were something more intimate and arguably more terrifying. They were personal acts of cruelty, carried out to fulfill a spiritual requirement, to sever one's final ties to the human herd. The act of taking a life was presented as the ultimate rite of passage, the final, irreversible step in forging a new, predatory consciousness. This is where the true horror of the system became apparent. It was a repeatable process for manufacturing sociopathy. But this is just the first layer of this story. The true leap into organized terror came through the O9A's symbiotic relationship with neo-Nazi accelerationist groups, most notoriously the Atomwaffen division. Atomwaffen and its splinter cells were not merely inspired by the O9A, they adopted its esoteric framework as their spiritual backbone. They found in the order's dark paganism and sinister cosmology a mystical justification for their campaign of racist violence and their explicit desire to collapse civilization. Suddenly, the O9A was no longer just a cult, it was the ideological engine for a recognized international terror network. Its complex, often contradictory texts, steeped in irony and esoteric blinds, acted as a perfect shield. For law enforcement and outsiders, it was nearly impossible to tell where the edgy posturing ended and the genuine murderous threat began. This was by design. The philosophy itself was a form of camouflage, a labyrinth of myth and disinformation that allowed its adherents to operate in plain sight, their deadly seriousness hidden behind a mask of occult absurdity. This was the terrifying genius of Mayat's creation. A system that could simultaneously inspire a lone individual to commit a ritual murder in a quiet suburb and provide the philosophical architecture for a global terrorist organization. The monster had stepped out of the shadows, wearing 1,000 different faces. But what happened next, as its influence seeped deeper into the veins of global extremism, is where the story turns from isolated acts of horror to a coordinated ideological war against the modern world itself. This war was not waged with armies on open fields, but with whispers in encrypted chats, with symbols hidden in plain sight, and with a strategy so insidious it targeted the very pillars of society. The O9A called this the insight role. It was a directive, a core tenet of their long-term strategy for adherents to infiltrate the institutions of the system they sought to destroy. The military, law enforcement, government agencies, even mainstream political and religious organizations, all were considered fertile ground for this cancerous seed. The goal was not merely espionage or passive sabotage. It was a slow, patient corrosion from within. An O9A member in uniform was more than a soldier. They were a living weapon, a Trojan horse tasked with eroding trust, misdirecting intelligence, and identifying other disillusioned souls ripe for conversion, all while waiting for the signal to bring the citadel down. This strategy transformed the movement from a fringe cult into a diffuse internal threat, a poison seeping into the veins of the state. The decentralized, leaderless structure of the order was its greatest strength. There was no central command to decapitate, no headquarters to raid. It operated as a collection of autonomous cells, or nexions, connected by a shared library of violent, esoteric texts and a common desire for chaos. Like a subterranean fungal network, it spread unseen, its tendrils reaching across continents. From the United States to the United Kingdom, from Germany to Russia, small groups would emerge, interpreting the dark gospels of the order and plotting their own contributions to the collapse. This metastasis of violent ideology was terrifyingly efficient. Each nexion became a laboratory for extremism, adapting the core philosophy to local grievances. Authorities would dismantle one cell, only for 3 more to spring up elsewhere, inspired by the same digital grimoires and nihilistic fervor. The violence that followed was both strategic and ritualistic, a horrifying fusion of political terror and black magic. Plots were uncovered to bomb news networks, assassinate politicians, and sabotage power grids, all calculated to accelerate societal decay. But alongside this, a more personal, spiritual horror was unfolding. Murders were committed that bore the chilling hallmarks of ritual sacrifice, a practice the O9A openly encourages as a means of culling the weak and channeling cosmic energies. For the true believer, there was no distinction between these acts. An act of terrorism was a form of black magic on a grand scale. A ritual murder was a focused sacrament performed to tear a hole in the fabric of reality and usher in a new, dark aeon. The line between a neo-Nazi terrorist and a satanic sorcerer had not just been blurred, it had been erased entirely. The ideology provided a transcendent justification for the most depraved acts, framing them not as crimes, but as necessary steps in a cosmic, evolutionary struggle. This created a new breed of extremist, one who kills not just for hate, but for spiritual ascension through transgression. The monster was no longer just at the gates. It was now inside the walls, wearing the uniforms of its protectors and speaking the language of its citizens. But the true horror lies not only in the plots they hatched or the violence they committed. It is in the modern, digital form this ancient evil has taken and how it continues to prey on the lost and the broken. Here begins the darkest part of the story, where the abstract philosophy meets the cold, hard reality of its human cost. In the vast, unregulated expanse of the internet, the Order of the Nine Angles found its perfect hunting ground, a digital wilderness where its predatory ideology could evolve and metastasize. The cold, sterile light of a million screens became the new moonlight for its dark rituals. It transformed from a fringe British cult bound by geography and the slow pace of printed manifestos into a global, decentralized phantom. It ceased to be an organization one joins with a formal oath. It became a current one tunes into, a virus of thought transmitted through encrypted channels, obscure image boards, and the dark tributaries of social media. There is no central leadership to dismantle, no physical headquarters to raid. The ONA exists as a set of texts, a collection of sinister symbols, and a brutal philosophy that can be downloaded and enacted by anyone with a grievance and an internet connection. This amorphous, leaderless structure is its greatest strength and the source of its modern terror. It is a ghost in the machine, whispering incitements to violence from the dark corners of cyberspace. A mycelial network growing unseen beneath the surface of our digital society. Its doctrines, once confined to poorly printed pamphlets passed between initiates, now spread like wildfire through the very infrastructure that connects our world, infecting minds with terrifying speed. The complex, layered symbolism and esoteric language that once made it inaccessible now serve as a perfect smokescreen online. It hides in plain sight, disguised as edgy counterculture, wrapped in layers of weaponized irony and nihilistic memes that act as a filter. To the uninitiated, it is meaningless noise. To the searching and the vulnerable, it is a siren song. The path to radicalization is a slow, insidious descent down a digital rabbit hole. It often begins not with overt hate, but with a search for meaning, a feeling of profound alienation from a world perceived as weak and corrupt. It leads to a forum where transgression is framed as strength and cruelty as a form of enlightenment. The path to radicalization is a slow, insidious descent down a digital rabbit hole. It often begins not with overt hate, but with the search for meaning, a feeling of profound alienation from a world perceived as weak and corrupt. It leads to a forum where transgression is framed as strength and cruelty as a form of enlightenment. The recruit is fed a steady diet of forbidden knowledge, esoteric texts, and a constant, looping narrative of societal decay, all while being algorithmically isolated from dissenting views. The digital echo chamber becomes their only reality, and the ONA's violent imperatives to disrupt, to destroy, to accelerate the collapse become their sacred duty. The threat is no longer a clandestine group performing rituals in the woods. It is the lone individual in his bedroom, his face illuminated by the screen, consuming this ideology until the lines between reality and the ONA's mythos dissolve entirely. He is being taught that he is not a criminal, but a sorcerer, not a terrorist, but a warrior in a cosmic war against the mundane world. His planned act of violence is reframed as a magical rite, a human sacrifice designed to tear a hole in the fabric of society and open a gateway for darker forces. He is being taught that he is not a criminal, but a sorcerer, not a terrorist, but a warrior in a cosmic war against the mundane world. His planned act of violence is reframed as a magical rite, a human sacrifice designed to tear a hole in the fabric of society and open a gateway for darker forces. But to understand the true, devastating cost of this digital poison, we must look past the abstract ideology and the anonymous avatars. We must see the faces of those it has consumed and the lives it has destroyed. To truly grasp the human cost of this digital poison, we must step away from the abstract and into the life of one individual it consumed. Consider the story of Ethan Melzer, a young American soldier stationed in Italy. On the surface, his life was one of immaculate structure and sworn purpose, a world of crisp uniforms, rigid discipline, and the sworn duty to defend his country. He was part of a system, a brother in arms, a cog in the vast machine of national security. But in the quiet, isolated hours after duty, when the barracks fell silent, another reality took hold, illuminated by the cold, sterile light of a screen. In these digital shadows, he found the order of the 9 angles. For a mind perhaps wrestling with a profound sense of disillusionment, a feeling that the world he was sworn to protect was itself a hollow facade, the ONA's ideology was not a repellent force, it was a magnetic one. It offered a secret, superior knowledge, a key to unlocking a reality far more potent than the mundane world of rules and regulations. It whispered to him that the society he served was a corrupt illusion, a cage of mundane ethics designed to restrain a lesser form of humanity. The ONA didn't just offer an explanation for his inner turmoil, it sanctified it. His alienation was not a flaw, it was a sign of his potential to evolve, to become more than human. The path laid out in the downloaded texts was not one of service, but of sublime transgression. He was instructed to see his position not as an honor, but as a strategic opportunity, an insight role. This single concept was the key that unlocked his transformation. His uniform became a costume, a perfect disguise to move undetected among the enemy. His barracks became a stage for his secret war, and his comrades, the men he ate with and trained with, were no longer brothers. In his new reality, they were unsuspecting pawns, potential sacrifices in his personal esoteric drama. The abstract philosophy of a cosmic war became a concrete, terrifying plan. Melzer began feeding sensitive information about his own unit, their movements, their security protocols, their vulnerabilities, to an extremist group, meticulously plotting a jihadi attack against the very men who trusted him with their lives. In his mind, this was not treason. It was a magical act of the highest order, a symphony of destruction. It was a human sacrifice designed to shatter the mundane world and tear open a Nexion, a gateway for the dark gods to pour through. He was the secret sorcerer, the hidden agent of chaos, fulfilling a destiny written in the stars. But the grand ritual was never completed. The plot was uncovered by intelligence agencies, and the would-be warrior mage was arrested before his dark fantasy could become a bloody reality. In that moment, the cosmic narrative collapsed, leaving behind only the bleak, cold truth. A young man in handcuffs, facing decades in a federal prison, his life irrevocably destroyed. His story is not an isolated anomaly. It is a chilling blueprint. It is the human face of the digital phantom, a testament to how an ideology of pure nihilism, wrapped in the alluring mystique of the occult, can reach out from the dark corners of the internet and turn a search for meaning into a plan for mass murder. It is the final, tragic proof that these are not just ideas, they are weapons. And like all weapons, they leave behind only wreckage. The promise of the Order of the Nine Angles is the promise of the abyss, a shortcut to godhood through the embrace of darkness. It is a masterfully crafted illusion, a grand cosmic narrative offered to those who feel powerless, a secret purpose whispered to those lost in the deafening noise of modernity. It tells the alienated soul that their insignificance is a lie, that they are, in fact, a hidden fulcrum upon which the fate of the world turns. It offers a key to a locked room, a glimpse behind the veil of mundane reality, and a role to play in a war older than time. It whispers that to become more than human, one must first become inhuman. But this is the oldest lie in history, a poisoned chalice offered to the spiritually thirsty, shimmering with the promise of forbidden knowledge. The path of transgression does not lead to a throne among the stars. It leads to a cold, solitary cell, both literal and metaphorical. It is a journey inward that hollows a person out, systematically dismantling the structures of empathy, connection, and compassion that define our humanity. The initiate believes they are shedding weakness, but they are truly shedding themselves, becoming an empty vessel for a nihilistic creed. The ultimate destination is not apotheosis, but a profound and irreversible isolation, a self-imposed exile from the human family. The grand ritual of destruction ends not with a bang, but with the quiet, sterile click of a prison door. The true horror of the O9A is not its arcane symbolism or its supposed connection to dark forces. It is its profound, predatory understanding of a vulnerability deep within the human spirit, the desire for meaning at any cost. It demonstrates with chilling precision how easily that sacred search can be twisted, how the hunger for transcendence can be weaponized into a justification for terror. It functions like a spiritual virus, seeking out those whose immune systems have been weakened by loneliness or despair, and it infects their search for purpose with a payload of pure destruction. This is not just the story of one occult group. It is a timeless parable about the shadow that walks along civilization, a shadow that grows longer and darker in times of great uncertainty and social fragmentation. It is a reminder that the most dangerous demons are not summoned from other dimensions. They are cultivated in the fertile soil of alienation, resentment, and nihilism. They are born in the quiet echo chambers of the internet, nurtured by anonymity, and fed a steady diet of conspiratorial rage. The screen becomes a black mirror, reflecting back not who a person is, but who they could be: powerful, feared, significant. The ultimate battle, then, is not against sinister Nexians or dark gods from some forgotten mythology. It is the internal, eternal struggle to build rather than to break, to connect rather than to sever, and to find meaning not in the explosive, fleeting thrill of destruction, but in the difficult, courageous, and often quiet act of creation. The abyss will always be there. It is a permanent feature of the human landscape, a potentiality within us all. It will always stare back. The ultimate test of our humanity is not just choosing not to leap into it, but in dedicating our lives to building bridges across it, to cultivating gardens at its edge, and to filling the void with a light bright enough to show others the way back. If this journey into the shadows gave you something to reflect upon, consider subscribing and joining us for more explorations into the complex fabric of our world. Thank you for watching.